In a couple of days' time, you're going to go to the polling booths and vote in what is quite possibly the most important vote in a generation. Students are being crippled by tuition fees, the NHS is on its knees, people can't buy houses, they're working on 0-hours contracts, and no one really seems to care about what is happening to young people in the UK. Apart from maybe one person, Jeremy Corbyn, who's made it the backbone of his manifesto to think about what's going to affect young people and what their needs are. So I'm going to go meet him and talk to him and see whether he's legit and for real. Okay, you started this campaign on the back foot. You were very much the underdog. Everybody was predicting a total Tory landslide, but in the last couple of weeks, there's been a huge swing towards Labour. The momentum is absolutely with you. So are you, Jeremy Corbyn, going to win this election, and will you be the next Prime Minister of Great Britain?
It's going very well, but we're not there yet. I was asked this question at Hackney Marshes this morning. It's a football question, so I said we're in the 84th minute.
What's the score?
We're coming up to draw, and then the last leg.
So you're behind in the 84th minute?
I'm not saying anything about that. What I'm saying is we're doing well because we're getting a discussion going, a conversation going across the whole country about an alternative. Do we have another 5 years of cuts in hospitals, cuts in schools, low wages, and a lack of investment in our economy, or do we do something different, which is what this is about? For the many, not the few. And I'm very proud of this document.
Why do you think that you are surging in the polls right now? What is it about the message that's connecting now that maybe wasn't connecting previously?
I think we're engaging with far more people than the Conservative Party are. We have far more activists than any other political party. We've got a huge party membership that are all pulling together and working really hard. I think that is part of it. There's also the broadcasting rules mean there has to be pretty much equality of airtime between the parties, which isn't necessarily something that applies outside of elections.
So you're saying that because the media is having to give you your fair airtime and people can see what you're actually all about and what your policies are actually all about?
They've got a chance to hear what our policies actually are. And in many cases that's for the first time because they can see it from the prism of their own eyes rather than the interpretation of somebody else. Now, they can agree or disagree with our policies, but at least know what they are and understand them, and essentially it is about redistribution of wealth within our society. It's not a complicated argument. The crash of 2008-9 led to the election of a Tory government in 2010 with the Liberal Democrat support. That led to cuts in just about every area of public life, and that has led to lower wages and has now led to chronic situation where schools are being told to collect money from the parents to keep the school going. Well, that's unacceptable. We're not a poor country, so we should do things a bit differently.
You talk quite a lot about hope. You use the word hope a lot, you use the word opportunity a lot, but hope is a bit of an abstract concept. You know, it's not something that's tangible. What's the tangible thing that you can do to make the UK a better place for young people right now?
Well, hope is about what you can achieve in your life. If you're living in expensive private rented housing, not very well maintained, with a 6-month assured short-hold tenancy, so you've got no guarantee beyond 6 months, and you're a kid in primary school, and your primary school hasn't got enough money, is having to get rid of teachers and teaching assistants, your life chances are getting hit pretty hard pretty early on. You then move schools because you have to move house. You then move school because you've had to move house again, and so on. What are your chances of doing well at a primary level, then getting into secondary, going on to do A-levels and so on? Pretty low, I'd say. So I want us to, as a society, recognise we've got to invest in all our people. That means housing. It means spending money, yes, on council housing, and I'm very prepared and very keen to do that. And it means spending money on schools, yes, I'm prepared to do that. And it means supporting people to go on to college and university, because that means they achieve and we all achieve more as a society. This does mean taxing corporations more. It does mean a fairer taxation system in our society, and I'm quite prepared to push that. It also means 95% of the people will not pay any more, but will benefit from this.
Theresa May calls this fantastical promises and a utopian vision. It seems that she's trying to dampen expectations. You're telling people that they should expect more.
I've never heard her use the word utopian before.
She wrote
I'm impressed.
She wrote a Facebook post in response to the manifesto launch, saying that this was a utopian vision, and that she's saying that that we cannot wish these challenges away. You're telling people to expect more. She's telling people that expectations need to be dampened. Why should people trust what you have to say above what she's saying?
Well, what her government has done is systematically reduced tax for corporations and continuing to reduce it, and continuing to preside over underfunding of social care, health, housing and education, and predicting to give away another 60 billion in tax write-offs over the next 5 years. We're simply saying, stop that process, reverse that process, and invest in public services, of course, but also invest in our economy for the future. We have the lowest levels of industrial investment of any European leading industrial country. That's got to change, and it's got to change fairly across the country.
With two quite polar opinions, it seems, yourself and Theresa May, the perfect thing to do would be obviously for you guys to duke it out and have a debate. Why won't Theresa May debate you on TV?
Well, I'm afraid I can't really answer that question, because it's a question you've got to put to her.
Why do you think?
Listen, I've said from the very beginning we should have a debate, and it should include her. Her reply was, and I asked this at Prime Minister's Question Time when we knew the election was coming, and she said, well, this is the debate. Well, it isn't. The Prime Minister's Question Time is MPs asking questions of the Prime Minister. I get to ask 6 questions, others get to ask 2 or 1. That isn't a debate, that's me questioning her. Now, I accept that's important, of course it's important, but it's not a debate. Whereas a debate between us, she's going to say this on her economic direction, I would say something very different. I think the public needs to be able to hear that and compare that.
You mentioned universities and tuition fees. So in your manifesto, you've pledged to scrap tuition fees. That's gone down incredibly well. I think that's maybe partly responsible for part of the support that seems to have surged behind Labour in the last few days. But also, what it's kicked up is a question for people who already have that debt, or people who are currently in university. What does it mean for them? What can you do for somebody who already has £27,000 worth of debt? You can look after the people going into university next year, but what about the people who spent 10 years being charged £9,000 a year?
Yeah. First of all, we want to get rid of student fees altogether, and we'll do it as soon as we get in, and we will then introduce legislation to ensure that any student going from 2017 to 18 academic year will not pay fees. They will pay them, but we'll rebate them when we've got the legislation through. That's just fundamentally the principle behind it. Yes, there is a problem of those that currently have a massive debt, and I'm looking at ways that we could reduce that, ameliorate that, lengthen the period of paying it off, or some other means of reducing that debt burden. I don't have the simple answer for it at this stage. I don't think anybody would expect me to, because this election was called unexpected. We had 2 weeks to prepare all of this, but I'm very well aware of that problem, and I don't see why those that had the historically misfortune to be at university during the 9,000 period should be burdened excessively compared to those that went before or those that come after, so I will deal with it.
Why is it important for students to leave university debt-free then?
Because I think if you leave university with a massive debt, then you've got that millstone around your neck. You have to pay it off if you earn more than 21,000. Quite a lot of it, by the way, is never paid off because people don't earn enough or go abroad or something. So there is a huge debt that's built up then in public. Others do pay it off, and of course it reduces their credit worthiness for other things in life. So if somebody's leaving university with Well, you mentioned 27, but these days it's probably more than that. I mean, I've had students in my own area who've coming out with 40 and 50,000 of debt because of maintenance needs as well. How can they even think about getting a mortgage on top of that? How can they go on with all the other things in life? And I think we should recognise that if you earn a lot more money from going to university, which you might, don't necessarily, but you might, then you're going to pay more in taxation. That's fair.
Quite a big part of the Labour manifesto is focused at the sort of needs and problems and issues that face young people. Why do you think that the other mainstream parties, and specifically the Conservatives, don't seem to have focused on that at all?
I think they've relied on the fact that in the last election, less than half of young people who were registered turned out to vote, and that they will therefore not register and not turn out to vote in this election. The whole story is actually very, very different. More than 2 million, mainly young people, have registered to vote since the election was announced. The registration period has now closed. And I hope that large numbers of young people are going to vote in this election. After all, it is about their future.
Will that potentially change the result that everybody's expecting? Will that change if a lot of young people go out and vote?
I'm not going to sit here and say what the result's going to be, because as of now, a very small number of people have voted by post. The majority will be voting later or on polling day itself. But the involvement and participation of young people is important. But what I find interesting at the events that I do, and I've done a very large number all around the country, is that the people who come to them are of all ages and all outlooks. And I mean, I did an event in Scarborough on the seafront. Loads of people there, young, old, black, white, gay, straight, men, women, all there, and getting on well together. Same in Leeds, same in Hull, all over. We're just getting these large numbers of people who are interested in the election and the options that go there. And so the message I'm trying to put forward is of intergenerational support and solidarity for each other. And so I don't think we should compartmentalise politics, say, older people over here, let's talk about social care. Young people here, let's talk about education. Let's talk about the totality of our society. You need old people to advise us. We do, because we're both quite young, aren't we? Well, you are anyway. And also, older people need the inspiration of young people around them. I mean, bring people together. That's what makes society strong. Don't blame each other.
Okay, so I'm a pacifist, right? And I'm really proud of the fact that I'm a pacifist. And I think that you are also a pacifist, and I think that you're pretty proud of that too. But you went on record recently as saying that you're not a pacifist. And who are you trying to please by saying that?
No, what I was just asked the question in the extreme situation, and the one that comes up always. I remember these discussions with my mum and dad as a kid. The Second World War is the problem one, over the rise of the Nazis and what they did. I am a person that wants peace in the world. I'm a person that spent my whole life campaigning for peace, and I want to lead a government that will be really serious about pursuing peace and disarmament. I've already appointed a shadow minister for peace and disarmament, and there will be a minister for peace and disarmament who will pursue those issues.
Britain's music industry is is a thriving export. How are you going to protect it when 40% of live music venues in London have closed down? It's the same picture across the country, but music generates so much money for this country. How are you going to protect grassroots music and invest in that?
Tom Watson and I launched a cultural manifesto in Hull last Monday, and the fundamentals behind it are a cultural innovation fund, which will be substantial, which will help with supporting cultural development, music venues, theatres and so on. An extension of the pub scheme, which encourages live music venues. And also, I would want to support and encourage local authorities to ensure there is rehearsal space available, because if you get a group of young people get together, form any kind of band, any kind of musical experimentation, be it so totally electronic or be it instruments, they're going to need space to do it. And most people live in quite small flats or houses, just don't have those facilities. And therefore, we would encourage that rehearsal space to be affordable. Also, pupil arts premium in the schools, 160 million into music and art education in the schools, which would have the spin-off of A, every child being able to learn a musical instrument, and B, that money would also be spent on local theatres and venues, so the schools would be seen by the local theatres and orchestras as a source of music for the future.
You said you're a music lover. Can you help us answer the quintessential NME question that people have been asking for over 20 years? Who was the best, Blur or Oasis?
I'm going to plump for Oasis, but I know this will immediately divide the audience. So what I should have said was I'll refer it to a focus group to decide, but I'm not keen on focus groups.
Right.
Is that a help?
That's absolutely fine. You've said previously that you're not interested in talking about coalitions. If it comes down to a Tory government or Labour needing to go into a coalition with the Lib Dems or the SNP or the Greens, are you prepared to do that to ensure that there isn't?
Yeah, we're determined to win this election.
Okay.
If we're the largest party and can form a government, we'll form a government. And if it's a minority government, it's a minority government. We are not going to coalition, we're forming a government.
What do you predict will happen to the NHS if we don't see change in this election? How close actually is the NHS to collapse?
I think it's very close to collapse. The A&E departments are grotesquely overcrowded. Social care is in serious crisis, more than 1 million in need of social care. And the debt levels and underfunding levels of every health authority are huge. If we don't put a lot more money into the NHS, then it will become not the first port of call for all of us. It will become a health service of last resort. And so those that can afford it would then buy private medicine, those that couldn't, and we'd end up with a sort of American emergency room system. I'm utterly appalled by that very prospect.
What happens if you don't win this election? You've got all this momentum, all these people who believe in you. What happens to them and what happens to you? Where does all this go if you don't win this election?
Well, I think we're going to win it. So we win it, and we have that huge opportunity to fundamentally change the way politics is done in Britain. And I'm very excited by it. I've spent all my life working on causes, representing my community, and I'm very excited by this opportunity.
And as a final message to the NME readers, what does the future look like for them if we continue in the way we're going, and what can it look like for them if they vote for change?
If we continue the way we're going, young people are going to have more debt, less opportunity for housing. Some will do very well, but the majority will not get the wages they deserve, the opportunities they deserve, or the society they deserve. Let's look at things a bit differently. We can afford lots of things in this country, but we cannot afford the levels of inequality that we've got. And that's why this document here, for the many, not the few, it does what it says. It actually says, let's redistribute, let's invest in people for the future, and invest in an economy that grows for the future, and bring people together. Don't blame each other, bring people together. We can achieve things together, and I'm very excited by it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Awesome.